when your integrity is called into question day after day after day, for some reason, my reaction was little by little to fall into a depression.
I can't think, I can't feel, I can hardly move. Complete fragmentation.
Medication has, literally saved my life and has brought me back from total insanity. I was completely insane.
But hearing that I had bipolar disorder sort of was like an arrow in my heart, you know, sort of, it just felt like, whoa, that's something bad, you know, that's something more serious.
The doctors had seen depression, but they never had really seen manic depression until I got psychotic. And I did certain things which led to my ultimate hospitalization and commitment to a psychiatric unit.
I was convinced I could fly, and so I tried to jump out of a window.
Hello, I'm Jamie Guth. This program is about depression and about mania. Both are major problems in our society. Depression affects about 17 million Americans, yet it's been estimated that only about a third get any treatment at all because of stigma and fear. That hopefully is changing because of a few extraordinary people who are speaking up.
Mine is just plain old-fashioned depression, first time around 1984.
Mike Wallace, the star reporter of 60 Minutes fame, the man who has struck fear into the hearts of many, was seized with his own brand of fear during a libel suit brought against him and CBS for his reporting on General William Westmoreland.
Aside from feeling lower than a snake's belly, I had pain, real pain, like knives, in my arms, and a certain amount in my legs. I felt spacey. And I didn't want to live, really. I did not want to take it anymore.
Mike Wallace's own family doctor missed the diagnosis, and it wasn't until months later that a psychiatrist finally suggested he needed medication and therapy.
I was so ashamed.
Ashamed?
Yeah, I was ashamed.
Why ashamed?
Who knows? It was stupid. There's a certain, come on. Tom Eagleton couldn't run for national office because of it. The senator, all kinds of people. It was in the closet.
This young man wrote this letter and he called
Mike went on to get treatment, but did not tell his colleagues. He won his court case, started feeling better, and stopped taking his medication because of the side effects. A tennis accident soon afterward led to concerns about mortality and another deep depression. He started back on medication and therapy and recovered. And then he had a third depression 8 years later at the age of 75.
There are trigger points that ordinarily might not put you into a depression, but chemically, now, you're more vulnerable.
Mike Wallace now takes the antidepressant called Zoloft, a cousin to Prozac, and he says he will stay on it for the rest of his life.
Do you ever fear that it will come back again?
Honestly, no. If I stay on this, he says there's always the chance. But he said if I don't stay on that, there's a 70% chance by the numbers, by the research that has been done, that it will come back. So I have no intention of tempting fate.
I feel haunted.
Lama Dejani also knows depression, knows it intimately. She grew up in the Middle East and early on felt overwhelmed by life.
But then there was the civil war in Beirut, and I was living there then, and everybody was depressed, everybody was fatalist.
But Lama Dejani is different from Mike Wallace in that she developed manic depressive illness, where she would cycle back and forth between the lows of depression and the highs of mania. It's a complicated disease that's believed to be inherited just like heart disease or diabetes or cancer. Over 2 million Americans have it.
I had a racing mind. I could not sleep. I used to talk a lot, on the go all the time.
Many of the brightest and most creative people have grown up with manic depressive illness. Jazz musician Charlie Parker, the writer Virginia Woolf, Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill, actress Vivian Leigh, and the artist Vincent van Gogh are all known to have had the disease. It's during the highs of mania that people often feel they're the most creative and productive, and it's the mania high that often goes undiagnosed. Lama Dejani had recognized her depression. She'd felt blue all her life, but her mania didn't start until she was 18.
You feel very elated, very energetic, very productive, and it feels like life means something. I experience a tremendous passion for life and love when I'm manic.
Lama loved the highs of mania. She would get up at 4 in the morning to paint, or get seized by an idea while driving her car and pull off to the side to capture the emotion. It felt like she was fully alive. But after the mania, the crush of depression would settle in.
In one of my pieces, I refer to it as the beast emerging from the mud and attacking me. And it feels like I'm a lonely skeleton in the closet. I can't think, I can't feel, I can hardly move.
How long did that last?
For a few months.
A few months?
Mm-hmm.
Every day?
Mm-hmm.
All day long?
Mm-hmm.
Lama went on to marry and have a son, and a career as an arts administrator. She curated major exhibitions of art for the Arab American Cultural Foundation in Washington, D.C. She saw a therapist on and off for 10 years, but wasn't diagnosed until she was 34. That was the year she had 2 major episodes of mania that led to a breakdown.
I remember when I met the psychiatrist to diagnose me with whatever I had, I was crying and telling him I need to learn how to learn to love life and love less passionately. I mean, it's killing me. I can't deal with it.
Lama was hospitalized during the last mania, and it was there that she painted these images.
Most of them are reflection of how fragmented I was. For almost a year, I was conscious that I was living in 2 worlds, the mundane, which I resented, and the dream world, which I resorted to whenever I wanted to be serene. And the problem is I could not look at these 2 worlds as part of a whole. The mundane world was like my depression, and the dream world was like my manic episode.
The treatment for manic depressive illness is in some ways the same as for depression, the right medication and ongoing therapy. The medication changes the chemicals in the brain, allowing it to react to the world in a healthier manner. And therapy helps the person understand the disease and to learn how to control it. There's a whole list of antidepressants to fight the depression. Then there are mood stabilizers to control the mania, and antipsychotics, which are used only when the mania escalates into psychotic delusions.
The Haldol was a pretty harsh drug to take. You get what we call the 13th floor shuffle. You're not really in control of your senses, and it was a very difficult drug to take, but one that was really necessary. There was no way to bring me out of that type of a high and to bring my body down to a level where I could even function.
Meet Susan Panico, 90s corporate executive, well-versed in high-end shopping along Michigan Avenue in Chicago, and party girl. She owned a court reporting business when her manias got out of control.
I made 32 trips to Los Angeles in 60 days for lunch. I spent $27,000 on clothes. I virtually bankrupted my business. After that, I began to become psychotic. I started to imagine that the FBI was following me, and that the mafia was following me.
Susan was 27 years old when she was put into a psychiatric unit against her will. She weighed 68 pounds from years of anorexia and eating disorder. She started having problems at the age of 13, but had always been misdiagnosed.
They did a splenectomy. They thought I had a rare blood disease. They removed part of my female organs, and they took out my gallbladder, and they did all different types of exploratory surgeries that really had no bearing on what was wrong with me.
She would come on board and do pro bono legal work for us.
The 27-year-old is now 40, and she heads the National Depressive and Manic Depressive Association. And she's concerned about the impact of stigma in scaring people from getting diagnosed and treated.
15% of the population that go untreated for manic depressive illness, for depression, commit suicide. And it makes this illness as fatal as any other illness and a public epidemic.
Did I think about committing suicide? You bet your life I did. Pills, gun, plastic bag. You feel like a fraud and a freak and nothing that you ever did, you really did. It was blind luck or you've pulled the wool over people's eyes or something. I tell you, and it's everybody that I talk to has that sense in one way or another.
It cost me 10 years of my life not to get treatment. I didn't get treatment for 10 years.
Kay Redfield Jameson was a graduate student in psychology when she was diagnosed.
And when I finally got around to thinking that there might be treatment, everything in my upbringing was against the idea of taking medication. It was just anathema to me. I couldn't imagine that I would have to take medicine.
But Kay Jameson became Dr. Jameson, and her training helped her launch a lifelong research and understanding into this disorder. She co-wrote a comprehensive textbook on manic depressive illness and a very personal account of her life with the disease.
There are a lot of books about depression and good books about describing what the experience of depression is, but very few that say, you know, why is it that so many people stop taking their medicines who have manic depressive illness? What is that euphoria like? What is the experience of it like?
It's as if everything is in overdrive. I think that's the easiest way to explain it.
Bob Boorstin was diagnosed with manic depressive illness 5 years ago.
You stop sleeping, you stop worrying, you start thinking everything you're doing is correct, you start thinking you're the smartest, best person in the world, you start getting hypersexual, you start getting out of control, I think is the only way to describe it.
Bob Boorstin was working for the Dukakis presidential campaign when his undiagnosed mania got out of control.
At first I was going to be, you know, the most important person in the campaign. Then I was going to be the vice presidential nominee. Then I was going to be this, then this, then this. And eventually, at the end of the episode, when I was in the hospital, I thought I was the son of God. That, believe it or not, is a rather typical manic episode.
Drugs are the first line of defense in treating manic depressive illness, but often people aren't diagnosed until the disease escalates and they become psychotic. And then they're put on the antipsychotic medications, which can have serious side effects. If the mania is treated earlier, while the person is still feeling good, the psychosis may be avoided.
You want to try to catch it within the first 3 days, so you're on the least amount of medication. I mean, that's the whole goal. You know, it's not like a miracle pill. It's a chronic illness like heart disease, and it's a chronic illness like diabetes. And then I made 7:30 reservations at Mango.
Not everyone recognizes their own manias, especially in the early years of the disease, or they may enjoy them so much that they don't want them to stop. So some people have learned to depend on family and friends to identify the early signs.
You become unaware of how you're acting. And it takes someone from outside who knows how you act normally to see that you're rising to a certain point. I can now see the beginning of it. But if it rose to a certain point, I'm still think that I wouldn't recognize that.
Families know when things aren't right.
Rona Purdy learned about manic depressive illness from one of her children.
And therefore, families are often the first ones who can see an episode about to occur and can often be there to say, whoa. But often it's the family that you get upset with then. Come on, Mom, I don't want to hear that. So there's got to be a way to be able to negotiate that relationship so that you can stay involved and that you don't feel like you're trespassing.
Rona certainly felt as if she was trespassing when one of her children was diagnosed 15 years ago. She was met with stony silence.
And families were treated as the perpetrators, as though you had caused it. And we were not included in the treatment team or in how to help the family member get better. It's a devastating, lonely, isolating experience for the family. Well, you know, it was an unfortunate situation.
Rona Purdy decided to fight back. She became involved with the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, an advocacy group made up mostly of parents of the mentally ill.
The treatment for manic depressive illness is more successful than is the treatment for many forms of heart disease. But it is the stigma that keeps people from going for treatment.
I didn't talk to anybody about it. I didn't talk to my friends. I didn't talk to, you know, my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, and definitely not my parents, because I never wanted to disappoint them. And I felt like somehow it was my fault. Come on, Alex.
Missy O'Neill fought years of eating disorder and depressions. But antidepressants only worked for a while.
Come on, Zoe.
A second psychiatrist diagnosed manic depression, but Missy wasn't so sure she wanted to end her mania.
I was never delusional. I never had hallucinations or, you know, thought I could fly off of a building or anything like that. Mine were more like just supercharged energy. You know, they weren't scary. And when I went on lithium, my main concern was, if we're going to try to make me feel level, am I going to feel level on the downward side, or am I going to really feel level at a normal place? Because in my opinion, I would rather have the intense highs and suffer through the lows than feel nothing at all again.
Zoe!
But a combination of lithium and 2 antidepressants took Missy to a stable level. And it's this combination of drugs that's often needed to manage the disease.
At that point, my life dramatically became better, just in terms of the way I felt. On a daily basis, I just felt like I was on a level plane, as opposed to being up and down and up and down and up and down all the time.
Once Missy felt the benefit from the medication, she was able to move ahead in therapy, too. And she decided to write about her illness in a poetry class she was taking.
My hair should be limp and dirty, tangled in knots. My clothes should be careless, unmatched and unspeakable. My eyes should be wild and furious and racing around the room. I should speak unintelligibly about places and people existing only in my reality. Instead, I am wonderbread. I walk and speak and drive a car like everyone around me. I have a job and do the laundry and brush my teeth. My insides often rage without my permission, but outside I look just like you. In class, when I read the poetry about manic depression, people were shocked, you know, and a lot of people said to me, "You seem so normal," you know, and I said, I am normal. You know, it's a chemical imbalance in my body that I can't help, you know, but I'm still a normal person.
The odd thing about manic depression is that it's a biological illness. It's genetic. It's caused by genetic change, but it feels psychological. It's your moods, it's your perceptions, it's your energy, it's how you face the world, it's how you perceive other people.
Medication is a critical part of treatment, but so is therapy, and that can take many forms, from writing to talking to a psychiatrist to painting. Lama Dejani is still struggling to get both the right levels of medication and the type of therapy that works for her.
I still haven't come to terms with the illness. I'm one of those who feel that my art has suffered on medication. It's because I no longer go through the same intensity of emotions that I used to. They control the mania, but not quite the depression. I mean, they take the fun out, but they leave you with the hell.
The mild states of mania, there's no way of describing how wonderful they can be. This is very hard to give up.
Why would you want to give it up?
Because it doesn't last. You give it up because it doesn't last, because it gets worse, because it can kill you, because it destroys your life and it destroys everything that's meaningful to you in your life.
Lama had manic depressive illness for 14 years before she was diagnosed correctly. Psychiatrists have found the longer you go without treatment, the more difficult it is to control the disease. Those diagnosed early do much better.
I'll be on medication for the rest of my life. If it had been caught younger, there may have been a possibility that I would only have to have taken medication during episodes.
Susan Panico has been through a huge variety of medications. It took her 10 years to figure out what was going to work best in what time of year.
When I had this third medication change, it was the third medication and the last medication on the market for mania, unless I went back to trying one of the older combinations, which had made me ill. And I was so frightened to start on the medication because I thought, what if this doesn't work?
But the medication did work, for now. Medicines are critical in the management of manic depressive illness, but it can take many years to come to that acceptance. The mania was too intoxicating for Kay Jameson, who continued to go on and off her medication for years, trying to prove she could manage without the drugs, trying to retain that wonderful bliss of mania.
My psychiatrist said once that, don't you think you've done that particular experiment enough times now? Because every time I go off my medicine, as surely as the sun would come up in the morning, I would get manic, and then I would get psychotic, and then I would get depressed. Here you're asking people to take medication for the rest of their lives. If the medication's working, you have no symptoms. So you're not motivated. You don't feel like you need the medicine.
I don't have the energy that I used to have, and I have a problem with tiredness and exercise. Just in general, that's something that I've been trying to work on and work out. And then I have a wonderful little tremor in my hand, which comes from one of the antidepressants that I take. But compared with ending up in the mental hospital, I'll take the tremor and I'll take the tiredness. So I have nothing to complain about.
This is not a perfect illness. It changes. It's cyclic. As you change, it changes. As circumstances around you change, it changes. I, going through a divorce, had a very difficult time and had to have a medication change during that.
Susan Panico was hospitalized with mania 2 months after her wedding. She had just come home from her honeymoon.
He fell in love with me as a manic person, and that's the person he was used to. The more he saw a different side of me, that he wasn't quite so sure that I was the person that he married. I was having a hard time melding the little girl at 13 to the grown woman at 35 and saying, where does this stop being it and where do I start being me?
Bob Boorstin now works in the State Department, where he helps develop international policy for the Clinton administration. He has the ear of the President of the United States and his support to speak openly about the disease.
I don't have any problems with it because everybody knows about my medical history in the federal government. From the very beginning when I joined the campaign, the Clinton campaign, I was very open about it. I've always been open about it since I was first diagnosed. I don't think there's anything to hide, per se.
Lama Dejani has had a very different experience.
I was very close to two of my co-workers who turned against me at the time that I was falling apart. And they're still out of my life. They can't deal with it. My mother got very emotional at the time that I was diagnosed with that illness, and she got very depressed. There's a lot of anger and disappointment.
You think they're disappointed with you?
I do think so. At least that's my own feeling about it. I mean, I definitely feel that I am the identified patient in this family system, and that hurts.
We don't treat the brain with the same respect and the same care and the same concern as we do other organs of the body. To me, the most important thing that we can let people know is that there's hope, and there's treatment, and there's treatments that work, and that people can lead a very full, normal life. Is it not everything that it might have been before? Yes, but that's part of all of us. I mean, we all learn through our lifetime that if only this had been different, if only that had been different. So there's a certain maturity that has to come with it. There is no shame in recognizing that the brain gets sick and that there is treatment and that treatment works.
There's just a lot more clarity in my life.
Missy is now working on a master's degree in creative writing. She continues to take her medicine, but she stopped therapy.
Because a lot of the issues that I wanted to work through, I did work through. You know, there's just nothing that's come up recently that I really feel like I need to work through that I can't work through on my own. You know, that's another really great aspect of the medicine, is that it doesn't make your life any better, but it just sort of slows the world down. You know, the world stops spinning long enough for you to be able to get a hold of what's actually going on in your life.
Will I stay out of the hospital for the rest of my life? I hope so, but there's no guarantee. You can never have a guarantee of that. One of my episodes was caused by, I wouldn't say an overdose, but too much of an antidepressant. It was just because we hadn't tried it before, and the doctor had no way of knowing that it would overwhelm the lithium, the mood stabilizer that I was on at that point. It was nobody's fault. It just happened, and these things happen.
I'm glad you decided to do this with me.
Oh, my mom and I have this great relationship, and we now laugh about it, and when there are things that go wrong, I'll say, it's your fault, it's your gene, you know, and she can take that now. In the beginning, she just crucified herself. It could have come from her. This is the best I've ever felt. When I was a child, I didn't think I'd live to be 40.
I have no interest at the moment in dying. I'm not afraid of anything, but I'm having a pretty good time, so why cash it in?